M.Gonzalez, and I do apologize from the very beginning. I do have COVID, so bear with me. Maybe there may be a lot of coughing in this PowerPoint, so I'm just gonna try to get through it as fast as I can. So, in the study of these journals that we've been discussing since week 8, we saw the analysis of researchers identifying racial profiling, right? So, we saw that the whole theory was if officers were conducting traffic stops based on race, and we saw this from the very beginning. And their whole theory behind this, sorry about that, their whole theory behind this is what influences police decisions to stop a particular vehicle and what influences the actions police take after making the stop. So, and we're going to see this in the course of the different journals that we did, and we also saw a important theory that was a police discretion theory, which showed how that influenced the markers as well, because a lot of these officers were also providing discretion in the traffic stops based on the outcome of the traffic stop itself. So this is an important factor because it did influence in all three states that were analyzed, and the data and how this is something that the majority of the public doesn't see, and how most of these officers are pretty lenient for some of these offenses. So one of the factors that we saw in New Jersey, which was one of the states that was analyzed, was that researchers were finding how it was inconsistent how the New Jersey State Police operated versus kind of their policies and regulations. So they saw a lot of close hand operations from an officer's perspective versus kind of the book policy on how they should be doing things. And they saw good things and they also saw bad things. They saw how they ignored certain crimes, but then they laid the iron fist on other crimes. They also mentioned how they made comments that were inappropriate or could have been sexist or racist at some point. But what was interesting was they kept it. Sorry, what's interesting was they kept it as clear as possible, and they even maintained the confidentiality of the officers to be able to perform this data as clear as possible. And then another important thing is how they had access to everybody's information on their badge numbers to be able to show this direct correlation between certain officers and the number of traffic stops conducted on minorities. So some of the developments that they gathered while conducting this research was they broke it down into different categories, which was the deployment of the officers. Do more troopers? I should say these are a lot of the research questions that were proposed was the deployment. Do more troopers happen to be deployed in areas with higher proportions of minorities? Also, their behaviors in comparisons with engaging in a white officer versus a non-white officer. Also, the instrumentation, evasion, and the overall interaction between these officers. The validity factors that were well documented in these analyses was how they were very well suited to be able to even take photographs of the people who were getting traffic stopped, which would validate the person's race and also sex as well. And you have a team of people who were analyzing the photographs, making sure that they were the highest possible quality photographs in the scene itself, and then even the photographs that weren't very clear, they would have three different people agree on the race and quality of the photos as well. So this pretty much gave this integrity to their overall pick. In conclusion, this was a very quantitative research approach, which overall the strongest was seen in the states of North Carolina and Pennsylvania. And then we saw different factors as well. Like we saw the radars implementations, we saw police records analysis, we also saw the surveys and the self reports data that was also presented. that also help find the what's called the benchmark of these traffic stops on how they conducted their operations. So overall, there was a quantitative approach, which was the main focus in their study. However, there were some elements of qualitative research as well, and this is particularly relevant for understanding, police practices, decision making, and attitudes towards traffic enforcement and racial profiling. So overall, do I think this was appropriate? Yes, to an extent, I do believe this was appropriate. They had all the research, and they pretty much made sure to be able to find it as unbiased as possible. I do wish that they would have focused a little bit more on the qualitative and focused on the training of the officer, and their years of experience, and also their cultural background and how that would influence their overall approach on a traffic stop, on how they would either focus on the traffic stop itself or they would focus on the individual behind, and then pretty much just what goes through their overall mindset. And that's my PowerPoint. Thank you very much for bearing with me.